instead of, have you got a few minutes to talk? I call people on the phone and I say, is now a bad time to talk? Or I will frequently send that in a text. And there are a number of very predictable yes-oriented questions that can be immediately shifted to no-oriented questions. Do you agree becomes do you disagree? Is this a good idea becomes, is this a ridiculous idea?
Welcome to the Waste No Day podcast, a podcast specifically for and about the home services industry as it relates to plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical. More than a podcast, Waste No Day is a credo, a determination, a mindset. It is a never-ending discipline. It is a refuse to lose pursuit. It is a wake-up call every morning to waste no day. Now here's your host, Brian Burton and Nate Minnick.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Waste No Day podcast. Your hosts, Nate and Brian, hanging out with you again. And man, do we have a good show for you today. One of our most popular guests in all of Waste No Day history is returning today to join us on the show. That's right, Chris Voss, Mr. FBI hostage negotiator himself and CEO of the Black Swan Group, is back on the WND. And man, we are here for it. So stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss this one. But just to keep you on your seat's edge for a little bit longer, Brian and I are going to talk a little bit ourselves. You can just hit the fast forward button about 5 or 10 minutes here and get straight to Chris. But in case you're interested in hearing what we have to say, Brian, where are we starting with our quote?
90% of selling is conviction. 10% is persuasion. Shiv Kira.
Conviction versus persuasion. Okay, conviction. Yeah. Let's define that.
Let's talk about why I wanted to use that quote. I wanted to use that quote today because what we're going to talk about, obviously, with the number one negotiation coach in the world, is we're going to talk a lot about the art of persuasion and persuading and body language and facial expression and tonality. And, I'm guessing it's just all things persuasion. And, I don't know about the 90%, 10% or whatever, but I do know that the people who are the most convicted about their product and they're overflowing with conviction and belief are the top salespeople. So it definitely starts with that. If you have no conviction and no real true belief in your product, all of what Chris Voss is going to teach you is going to be great for your relationships at home and going to put you on a great path with your boss and negotiating raises, although hopefully you're straight commission if you're a salesperson. But you're not going to be able to sell something you don't believe in, and nor should you really try, because if you don't believe in it, then it's probably not that good for people. Right? So I just wanted to touch on that part and say, if you lack an utter belief in your product or your company, team, install department, whatever, you better get to work on those things, because this episode's not going to save you there.
Well, neither would conviction of, hey, you should let the people go necessarily going to save anybody either. Because neither would conviction, like Chris Voss's conviction that you should let people go because that's a really good thing to unharm them, isn't necessarily going to get the job done from the other person. Hence the persuasion piece.
In the hostage negotiation world, you mean?
Yes.
So, work on that piece. Either switch products, because most of the home services trades have plenty of products that you can focus on, not just one. Although if you're at a mosquito squad company and mosquitoes are your favorite animal on earth, you might have issues there. It's probably time to find a new job. If that is the case, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you and I can't hang out. That's for sure. Little flying vampires. They should not be considered animals, right? So figure out the belief part and then come back to this episode when you're ready and you have a product you believe in, and Chris is going to put you in the top 5% of your trade using these strategies. And like I said before, all around better communicator and live a much better life with this.
Yeah, fantastic. And Chris knows that near and dear for sure. He's not a guy who's, while he is extremely well educated, he's not a eternal student with no field experience. Like, this is all battle tested and proven out in the field. The things that he talks about is stuff that he's learned the hard way. And when I say hard way, I mean like people died along the way. And he's gathered and rebounded from those experiences and put all that into not only one book, but now he has multiple books. I'm sure we'll get into that today, to kind of encapsulate all these different strategies and ways of approaching the art of negotiation.
Yeah, and it is funny because my team and I talk about Chris Voss time to time in training, especially now, obviously, with him coming back on the show. And I'm just, I'm barely containing my excitement here that I get to talk to Chris Voss again, which is just ridiculous. We talk about, like, we're nervous on our calls, when we're early in our sales careers, like it's a life or death situation. Chris learned these strategies in literal life or death situations. Like, the stakes on his sales calls were high because he's going in. If, my daughter gets kidnapped in Costa Rica while we're on vacation and terrorists hold her hostage, the United States government is telling the Costa Rican government to sit back and let them send Chris in, and Chris is going to try to negotiate getting her back unharmed. And if he's having a bad day, it doesn't mean one of our competitors got the heat pump and we didn't, right? If Chris has a bad day, it could mean the daughter dies. Or in their world, it's even a bad day if the hostage takers get taken out. That's right. That's where we differ. Remember, we had Sandy Hine, one of their trainers, on, and she was just like, this guy had shot his baby's mother, and she was in there bleeding out, and he was threatening to shoot the baby, and then he killed himself. And she's like, it was a horrible day. He took his life, and I couldn't stop him. And I'm just like, horrible day. The baby was cool. The mom lived. That's a win. We don't have to pay for him to sit in jail for decades. I don't know. I thought, hey, high five, Sandy, but no, she didn't. So we have different definitions of winning, but their thing is, well, what does he always say? It's my favorite quote of Chris's. And we talk about this in our training all the time. And hopefully we talk about it with Chris. In a successful negotiation, both parties win. Mm. And that's a tough thing. That's got to be a tough thing to feel in his line of work, right? In the hostage negotiation. And sometimes it can feel tough even in our line of work when we're at that kitchen table and it's somebody we just don't like and don't see eye to eye with. And, there are often times, and we don't really go into the real nitty gritty of being at the kitchen table, but oftentimes, like, you like the wife, cool. You really like her. You connect with her. She's a good fit. You can't stand this guy sitting next to her. Like, you don't like the way he treats her. You don't like the way he treats the kids. Everything about him makes you just, I cannot stand him. And there are times where you're just like, I don't want you to win, but that's the whole Sandler training thing of leaving your kid in the car. In our case, leave your kid in the truck. It's like, don't get your emotional needs met in there. Make your paycheck needs get met and be somebody else's hero and get your needs met that way.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get into more ideas like that with Chris. And if you didn't catch this episode before, I'm sure we'll talk about that with him. But he was on WND where we went pretty in depth on his main book, which is Never Split the Difference. And as I mentioned, he has several others out now, and we'll see if we can touch on those as well. Before we get into that, though, Brian, it's time to highlight one of our listeners to see what they have to say about the show. Who do we have on the spotlight today?
Thank you for what you do. 5 stars.
You're welcome.
Thank you for all the great experience, backed wisdom you share, and the special guests you bring on. You all have really helped open my eyes to the level of professionalism that can and should be delivered. Thank you, Waste No Day. This is Tochoa123, TOCHOA123. I was trying to do some different, like when you're staring at a license plate from behind, that you just spell something out, but you can't piece it together. I spent some time on this review, and for all I know, he was writing a review. His 2-year-old grabbed the phone and just hit enter after typing in some name, and it burned up 8 minutes of my day trying to figure it out.
How'd you spell it?
TOCHOA123.
I was going to say maybe it's a city, but no such luck. All right. Well, Tochoa, we appreciate you anyways, even if we don't understand your cryptic username.
Yeah. And maybe this is a good time to talk about, because this is obviously going to be a well-downloaded episode. And I'm guessing most of the people listening have already skipped past this part. So it's all right. We can take as long as we want, right? Nobody's listening anyway. And gotten right to when they hear Chris Voss's voice come over. But the reviews help us a lot. Sharing the show helps us a lot. There's a link to the Facebook group. And what do I mean by help? Like, Nate, how much did you make off Waste No Day last month?
Twice as much as I did last year.
Which was about?
It's still zero.
Because 2 times a zero is a zero. Right. We don't collect anything. We don't make anything. We don't sell anything. We don't offer anything. Nothing. Yet. We will at some point. But we don't. And there are a lot of people who for years now have said, I want more. Where do I get it? And at some point we'll package something up and make that available. But we'll never ask for money to keep the show going, despite how many people have reached out and asked us to crowdfund when we were going through buying the show from the previous.
Is that a thing?
Employer.
Because that link didn't make it to me, Brian.
Dude, you sent me one personally. It absolutely did. Yeah, somebody had said it's selfish of us not to reach out and let the audience help. That the show's done so much for, and it was touching for both of us. We were moved by the message, but that's not what we want. We just want to give of ourselves, give back to the industry that really did so much for both of us, but saved my life and pulled me out of Detroit and gangbanging and drugs and stuff that I'm glad that my kids don't ever have to see unless it's the documentary about their dad, one day, directed by Chris Nolan. Thank you very much.
Narrated by Morgan Freeman.
Yeah. So we're not asking for money or anything, but if you can take the time and write a review, it helps the show. If you can share it on one of your social medias, it helps the show. If you can just tap a friend at the shop and say, hey man, you would probably really like this, it helps the show. But hey, if you just want to sit back and listen, we appreciate your time.
We sure do. And we know you're going to appreciate this guest. And Brian, I appreciate you for getting him back on. I know that's not a small thing, and not a lot of people can have those connections and make that network work. So well done.
It's really nothing. It's nothing.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyways, that's the last compliment for the day. And it's time to move on now to put Mr. Chris Voss in your passenger seat. Our guest today is Chris Voss. He is the best-selling author of Never Split the Difference, former lead international FBI kidnapping negotiator, and CEO and founder of the Black Swan Group. During his 24-year career with the FBI, he served as the FBI's hostage negotiation representative for the National Security Council's Hostage Working Group, and he has represented the United States at 2 international conferences. He's been recognized for a number of awards, including the Attorney General's Award and the FBI Agents Association Award for Distinguished and Exemplary Service. He has received negotiation training from the FBI, Scotland Yard, and Harvard. Wow, I just threw in a Boston accent there. Without even trying. Harvard Law School. And since retiring, he has indeed earned his master's in public administration from Harvard University and taught a number of esteemed institutions, including the University of South Carolina Marshall School of Business, Georgetown U, Harvard, Northwestern U, and the IMD Business School in Lausanne, Switzerland, and the Oh, I'm going to screw this one up. Goethe Business School of Frankfurt, Germany. Sure. Well, anyways, I'm glad Chris won't hear that intro because I'll probably made a fool of myself, and it probably will continue to do so as we discuss one of the best hostage negotiators on the show today. Welcome here, Chris.
Thanks, fellas. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Great to have you back. Your favorite of, well, your Waste No Day episode was a favorite of, I would say, the majority of the listeners of the show. I'm probably going to go out there and just say it. It is my favorite episode of the Waste No Day podcast.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. I appreciate that.
But don't tell the audience I said that, obviously.
You like it better than the one you did with Stormy Daniels? Is that right?
that was a video. No.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay.
Since you were on the Waste No Day podcast, man, it wasn't long after your first Waste No Day episode was July 18th, 2022. And not long after that, you were on Jocko's show, and then you were on Jordan Peterson's show, and then you were on like 100 other shows. And those are two of the shows that I listen to pretty regularly.
So clearly the influence of Waste No Day is just...
I didn't want to say
I'm grateful to you guys. Thank God that you opened all those doors.
Yeah, there's no such thing as coincidences, right?
So good. Well, we're excited to have you back, Chris, and we're excited to talk more things about hostage negotiation and beyond that. As you know, we are part of an industry that we like to refer to as the home services industry. Predominant audience is HVAC, plumbing, and electrical, but we've, since the last time you've been on, we've realized that more and more people in roofing and power washing and, the list goes on, are joining in on this type of content. And so very excited to have you back on today. As Brian mentioned, you've already been on before, so if you're listening to this and you haven't heard that, go back and listen to that episode from July of 22. Great content. But in case somebody's a new listener or they haven't just been as familiar with your work before, Chris, why don't you give us the nickel tour on who you are and what your background is?
Yeah, I'm a retired FBI hostage negotiator. And then I wrote a book about business negotiation, using the ideas of hostage negotiation, putting them into everyday life, never split the difference. And since that book came out in 2016, it's pretty much led the business category almost from day one. It was a little slow in the beginning, but once we got to the top of the category and the word's gotten out that it's usable stuff is what it really is. It's not theoretical, academic, philosophical. It's usable stuff that works. And I checked it today. It's a top 20 most read, most sold book on Amazon now for almost 3 years solid.
That's got to feel amazing. I can't really imagine what it's like, to be able to write those things from field application, turn it into a tangible help for so many other people, and then realize that it continues to endure for so long.
Yeah, it's great. And the people that recognize me because of it, they're always regular human beings, entrepreneurial, want to very much about success, but not necessarily success at somebody else's expense. Success by doing a good job, by delivering a great product, by doing really well for their family. But, it's not a zero-sum world. You can do really well without having to hurt other people. And anybody that recognizes me because of the book, I know that they're about collaboration and being really successful.
We quote you all the time in our training here in Phoenix, where I'm at. In a successful negotiation, both parties win.
Yeah. Yep.
To your
1,000%,
point.
Yeah.
So, Chris, I have to ask you just something kind of humorous to start us off here today. I'm sure you've been involved with a fair amount of incarcerations across your career, and I was just curious if any of those fond people have utilized your tactics to escape from jail, so to speak.
Well, not escape from jail, but, being retired from the FBI, being out of the Bureau now, there's less restriction on who I could hang out with. It was actually to make sure you didn't do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, inadvertently say the wrong thing. Like associating with known criminals while you're an FBI agent, it's just a bad idea. It's just a stupid idea. On the other hand, I got several friends now that are convicted felons for some really bad stuff. And one of the guys, Andre Norman, great friend of mine, former prison gang leader, he's actually promoting the book in his work with prisoners to how to, get out of jail and stay out of jail. You got to be successful. And he pushes the book a lot for people that are serious about getting out of jail and staying out of jail.
Wow, that's a really unique turn on things, and thanks for sharing that. That's really cool to hear. I'm sure that's got to feel fulfilling.
Oh yeah, it's great. I mean, I'm one of these kind of people. Like I want more contributing people to society. You know, you want to work for a living, you want to pay your taxes, you want to be a positive impact on our economy instead of being a guy or gal who's not working and wondering why they don't have any money. Like I don't care where you came from. You know, follow the rules, make a living, pay your taxes, do well for your family. Then you're my kind of person.
Well, then I believe most of our audience would fit into your type of people, Chris, because we have salt of the earth listeners who are in the in-home services industry, you know, fellow tradesmen who are out there turning wrenches every day, sweating it up, putting in that sweat equity to accomplish great things. And so as we kind of turn into the meat of the topic here, you know, your book, obviously is making great waves in the business community. And I'm not sure that the trades gets its fair shake when it comes to, you know, the typical quote unquote business mindset. And yet we do believe that so much of your book and the principles behind it are applicable to what we do, which is why, of course, we asked you to come on again. And so as you kind of think about the scope of your book and all the principles that you were trying to communicate in there, and you think about what it means to have a plumber or an HVAC tech or electrician walk into your home, what would you say would be like the top one or two things that you feel from the concepts of your book really apply into your observance as a homeowner to make the home services experience better?
Well, first of all, with the basic assumption that you're authentic, you're credible, and you deliver a great service, I don't think you should ever cut your price, ever, because if you over deliver, then your price is a good price. Now stick by your price. Any contractor that comes in, like I don't bargain with any contractor that comes into my house over price. I'm gonna want you to live up to your word. You know, you show up on time. You're gonna be reliable. You're gonna do what you said, and probably over deliver. Then I'm good with my price with you. And sometimes I got a very small select group of people that I rely on to come into my house. And I say, you know, pay me what you want or tell me what you want. I'm going to pay it. I'm going to expect you to deliver like crazy, but I'm going to pay what you ask. Now, these guys start referring each other. And the follow-on business from the select group of contractors, because I got one guy that comes in and fix something. He says, I can't make it. All right, I'm going to refer to you, you know, Saul the plaster guy. Like, awesome. And Saul shows up right on time. Like, I'm not sitting around waiting for Comcast to show up. We'll be there sometime between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Don't know when we're going to come in the door. And Saul comes in and he delivers. And I pay him what he asks. And I think that as much as, you know, being on time and delivering or over-delivering, these guys are going to start to refer each other. That's how you build a business. Because when you refer somebody, you're their ambassador. And if you don't deliver, if you show up late, if you don't do what that guy promised you, then you hurt that guy. You hurt everybody in your environment. And then that guy's not going to trust you again. And on top of that, if you fail to deliver, I'm going to worry about the guy that referred you. So if you're providing a referral to a buddy that you hope is going to do a good job, hope is not a strategy. You're trying to bail somebody out by giving them some work, but they got a history of, they don't show up on time, or for whatever reason they're cutting corners. Now, they're your friend, they're your buddy, you want to help them out. Like, I'm not trusting you for a referral ever again. Like,
right.
You got to refer, you got to do quality work, and you got to refer quality work. Same thing. I got a referral recently from a doctor to a specialist. Doctor's a contractor, no different than any other contractor. The specialist, the doctor might be the GC, and the specialist might be, the plumber, the electrician. I go in, and the referral to the specialist, guy's an idiot. Just an absolute idiot. I don't know what was going on. He was having a bad day. wasn't listening to me, I don't care. You know what? I'm going to fire my GC. I'm never going to that. I'm cutting relationship because he's referring me to a buddy. He's hoping a buddy's going to do well. I don't know if it's a brother-in-law, it's a cousin, somebody he went to school with. But these guys, I don't care why they didn't deliver. I'm not going back, and the person that referred me is going to lose my business also. So deliver quality work and don't cut your price.
Yeah, that's such a great emphasis about a lot of things we try to communicate. I mean, either you're worth it or you're not, right? And just thinking like those guys have got to be nervous going into the house of Chris Voss.
Well, if anybody's surprised by something, they're going to be surprised that I'm not going to bargain over the price. I'm going to want to know.
I'd be like psychoanalyzing that. Like, is he doing that on purpose? You know,
if you're a Chris Voss fan and you're a fan of the book, I think that I would go in ready to do the job for free just to be able to negotiate with Chris Voss. 100%. I'm like, this is probably going to be free. I know what he's going to do to me, but I'm giving it my all.
Yeah, no, I want a long-term relationship with you. I want, and the other thing I did, one of the contractors, I said, you know, what kind of scotch you like? And he told me, but he's like, look, man, you know, you don't need to lay that out. I'm just coming out here to look things over, to let you know what it is. Like, before he even told me what the price was going to be or when he was going to do it, I went out and I was going to be out of town when he came through. So I that morning before I hit the airport, I left a bottle of really good scotch out there before he did the job. Not after, before he did the job. Because I'm going to be the most appreciative client you ever had as long as you deliver like crazy.
It just makes sense too, doesn't it? Like, I never understand the clients when we get to their house and they immediately get combative and you're like, we're doing work in your house, not the other way around.
Yeah. And then, you know, you don't need that guy as a client. Personally, I don't think anybody needs bad clients either, bad customers. You don't need them.
So, Chris, obviously you're aware of the current state of events in terms of our economy. Money isn't as accessible. It's not as cheap as it used to be. It's not as free flowing. And so across the trades, there's absolutely been what if you want to call it, a pullback or some type of slowdown from what it had been during even, you know, the last time we spoke, 2022 was a really good year for the trades. And it was kind of the year that, you know, things were starting to slow down, but nobody was paying attention. And then 2023 hit and boom, we fell off a cliff. And so I want to kind of bring that into the conversation here because during the COVID years, you know, 20, 21, 22, so the home services industry was exploding. Everybody was working from home. Contractors were welcomed in with open arms. Yes, come make my house better. Come fix all these things. You know, quality of life, you know, better air conditioning, better plumbing, better water quality, better panels, the whole deal. And then 2023 came around and said, haha, hold my beer. Wow. We're not going to do that anymore. And so there's been a lulling of skill and of challenge over the years where things were very easy for a couple of years. And I think we all got a little bit of fat and lazy habits in our lives. So speak to perhaps a time, if there was a time, when the great Chris Voss got a little too big for his britches in terms of like, did you ever get to a point where you too just thought everything flowed so easily? Or was that never a case in the hostage situation? And then, you know, it kind of talk to us about how you worked your way out of that.
Well, I think, first of all, in hostage negotiation, things are going to go bad. They try to teach you that from the beginning. And then when it does, if you don't say to yourself, you know, they warned me this was coming, then you're the idiot. Because they warned you. My former boss, Gary Nessner, always used the phrase "best chance of success." And then a case that I thought was going to turn out well went sideways, horribly sideways. And the process worked really well all the time, and it was just one of those things that was going to happen. And I remember thinking at the time, all right, best chance of success means you're not always going to be successful. It really caught me off guard. It was the first time I worked cases where people had gotten killed. And then I thought, all right, but then how do I get better? When it goes bad or the conditions change or the environment is bad, I'm always driving myself to get better and to get smarter. And I think that's the one competitive advantage. There's different phrases out there that says the only sustainable competitive advantage is learning. Because most people don't learn. Most people don't get smarter. They're not always trying to get smarter, trying to get better. And some people will quote that. Jack Welch would add into the quote, and to be able to put your learning into application faster than anybody else. I don't think you need to be able to do it faster than anybody else. If you're steadily learning, what you can count on is the people you're competing with are not. And even somebody that's smarter than you today, they're probably going to get lazy. There's going to be that point in time where they're going to get fat, dumb, and happy. Just like maybe it happened to you. If that isn't just a kick in your ass to go back to learning and getting better, getting smarter, being better at what you do for a living, being better at how you deliver what you do for a living, it should kick you in the ass and you should get back to it. And because you can count on 8 out of 10 of your competitors are going to stop learning. If you keep it up, you're going to pass them.
It's Thomas Edison who said 5% of the people think, 10% of the people think they think, and the other 85% of people would rather die than think. Pretty sure that was Thomas Edison.
Yeah, probably. And you start to see that echo in success in life in all these different ways. And, Thomas Edison said it. Somebody else says it here. Somebody else says it there. Jack Welch says it. Whoever says it. And it becomes a universal principle that you could count on. And if you don't quit and you don't stop learning, you're going to beat everybody. Everybody.
So, Chris, kind of going back to that scenario where you said you thought it was going to go well and it went sideways real quick. I don't know if you're available to share more details on that, but even so,
is that classified or?
No, it's in Never Split the Difference. It's the Burnham-Sabero case. Went back and forth. That was one of the things I loved about Tal Russ, writing a book with Tal. Brandon and I and Tal wrote the book together. Because I work with previous authors, and I'm like, hey, I worked this case, this Burnham-Sabero case. Like, man, this thing was a 13-month train wreck. People got killed. We upped the level of our game afterwards. We said, all right, so what did we do wrong? Didn't do anything wrong. Okay, if we didn't do anything wrong, that still means we weren't smart enough. We got more to learn. And one writer in particular that I fired said, no, we can't put any of your failures in there. And Tal said, no, absolutely, we have to. You got to show that you failed and then you decided to learn more because of it. And so, yeah, it was, I don't know how I got started on this a second ago. But,
if you'd, I have a, if you wouldn't mind going into a little bit of detail about the story, because I do want to follow that up with, I'll follow it up with a couple questions that I think would be really pertinent to our audience and us as individuals.
Well, yeah, I assume since our heart was in the right place and our mission was to save American lives, that everybody on the American side of the table would take that same attitude. And they're like any agent that you might work through. Your priorities are good until their priorities are more important, and then your priorities go out the window. Like the unnamed 3-letter agency from across the river. I remember they told me early on, like, well, if you get 70% of what you want and we get 100% of what we want, that's 170%, right? And at the time, I'm like, I don't know what this means. And what the dude was trying to tell me was, your priorities are secondary to ours. And you, in his own bizarre spook-like way, because, you refer to spies as spooks. He was trying to tell me that they, don't expect them to not let me down. Don't expect them to not let me down. And I couldn't imagine that would happen. And so I didn't make sure that my team was aligned. And crazily enough, bad guys on the other side weren't aligned either. Like we had coached this tremendous working relationship between a representative for the families and a rep for the bad guys. They actually got along well. But he didn't know that his team was going to double cross him. Because the previous case that we'd had, the stars of the success were the negotiators, and the supporting team felt left out. So it's almost like a championship team. You know, what happens in any professional sports league when a team wins a championship by playing like a team? Well, then some of the people go, I didn't get enough credit for that championship. You know, I'm more important now than the team. And they come back the next year and they fail because they won the championship and they get far more self-interested. And that was exactly what happened to us. And we put the championship players back on the field, but we had individuals that felt they didn't get enough credit last time around, so they weren't going to collaborate.
Wow. And that cost people lives.
A bunch of people got killed.
So that leads me to my question, which is, you know, that's a bad week, bad month, however long that took for you, bad day. We're running, you know, service calls, and certainly in most cases, the stakes aren't quite that high, although we do deal with gas and carbon monoxide, but we can have some pretty rough calls.
Yeah.
And the big challenge with getting hit in the mouth pretty severely in your first call of the day is it can really take an effect on your second and third and potentially fourth call of the day. So how did you, in that situation, how do you shake off a really horrible start to the week, month, day, you know, that's so severe it shakes you emotionally, and be ready for the next one?
Yeah, a challenge for everybody. Self-talk. You know, what's going through your head? How are you reliving this scenario? I will go back and I'll reimagine me not coming back with that zinger on that jerk, but coming back with something that would have pushed it in a positive direction. I mean, the self-talk is huge, and how you shake that off. I actually listened to a clip on Instagram. You know, my Instagram is an echo chamber. And it's an echo chamber for positive thinking, optimistic entrepreneurial people. Those are the people that I follow. And I need that self-reinforcement. I'm listening to it the other day, and they were talking about the top championship players, top 5% versus the top 25%. Top 5%, they screw up bad. And their self-talk is, all right, that one got by me, I'm going to handle the next one. You know, I'm doing what I want to do. I'm exactly doing what I want to do. And yeah, I screwed that up, but I'm going to do better next time. I'm going to do well. And that's the top 5%. The other top 20%, I'm getting mad. The other side was a jerk. You know, they're kicking themselves. They're imagining kicking the other side. It's how quickly can you reorient yourself into a positive frame of mind so that you don't go into a downward spiral. And it is not easy. But if you know what to rehearse in your head, that's what's going to make all the difference in the world.
Chris, did you ever feel like you were in a hostage negotiation with yourself?
Beating off the negative emotions that trigger me are an ongoing problem. Everybody gets triggered by something because we're wired to be negative. As human beings, how you're wired is for survival. And your survival instincts are 75% negative. So fighting that off to begin with in the first part of the day, I think of it as emotional hygiene. Just like oral hygiene. Do I got to brush my teeth this morning? I brushed them yesterday. Yeah, I do. Because the natural state of your brain is going to put you back in a negative state. And how do I do that? First thing in the morning, whatever I got to do, I just got to be appreciative of the day. Find a way to be appreciative of the day. Find a way to find 3 stupid little things in my world that I like or I'm grateful I have. And they got to be stupid and little. Like sometimes I'm grateful for my socks. because, in point of fact, a lot of people in this world can't afford socks. Stupid little things to be grateful for. I'm trying to set myself up through the course of the day. And then what do I get triggered by? I happen to get triggered most by people who lie to me. I know that sets me off faster than anything else. So then I got to practice pulling myself out of being angry, because when you get whatever makes you angry, the problem with being angry is a self-righteousness that kicks into gear, which doubles you down on the downward spiral. When you're angry, you're in a negative frame of mind. You're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. So when you're in a negative frame of mind, you're by definition dumber. Now, if someone has taken an action, done, or said something that triggered you into that, then not only are you dumber, but you're even more convinced that you're right to be angry. And it's just this downward spiral that's tough to pull out of. And finding something little to appreciative, tiny little ways here and there, are the best way to pull yourself out of it.
Now, Chris, one of the concepts in your book is don't feel their pain, label it.
Right.
Can you do that with yourself? Like, is it possible to not feel your own emotions, but to call them out with the name?
Now, you know what? It's still possible to label it. That's a great question. I love that question. Like all right, so you're feeling emotion where you have it, but you could call it out. Like, I'm angry. I'm scared. I'm worried. I'm worried how I'm going to pay my bills. Anger is a result of something that's happened. Anger is about something in the past. Frustration is about something in the future. If you're feeling frustrated, somebody's doing something that's keeping you away from something you want in the future. There's essentially a timeline to the negative emotions. But concern, worry, upset, these are fear with different masks. And I like going at negative emotions head on. And if I feel something that I recognize as fear in disguise, this is exactly the self-talk I go through. I will say to myself, I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm scared. Forget I'm not scared anymore. Because labeling it each time, calling it out, diminished it. And I will keep calling it out until I say to myself, screw it, it's gone. I'm fine.
So, like the next hostage situation that you got into after forgive me, I didn't catch the name, or I can't remember the name, but the one that went sideways on you, I'm sure there was all the voices in your head saying, you can't do this. This is going to go sideways. Like, you're a failure. All the new stuff you're going to try out isn't going to work. Like, it's, whatever. Like, could you actually call those things out and then dissipate the feeling? That seems kind of hocus pocus to me.
It does, yeah.
To put it in like a perspective here, we have a brand new plumber. He just started today, and like he's working in the home, and the first homeowner just absolutely plows over him. Like, he tries to say something, like, nope, not happening. And so the next call he goes to, all the voices are chirping, saying, same thing's going to happen. Same thing's going to happen. You can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it. If he sits in his truck before he goes into his third call and says, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. I am going to present, like, I am going to own this call. How does it actually change what happens?
Well, I wouldn't do it exactly like that. I would say, I'm scared they're going to kick my ass again. I'm scared I'm going to freeze up. This neuroscience experiment has been reproduced a number of times. What they did was they put them in an fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging device, which kind of wraps your head like a helmet. And it basically tracks the electrical activity in the brain. And when you're thinking, it shows how your brain is lighting up. And the neuroscientists got a pretty good idea where most things are. There's some argument as to what does what and specific mechanisms. But what they do, they put these people in these fMRIs, and then they show them photos of stuff that caused them to think negative thoughts. Now, I don't know what the photos were. It might have been a puppy in the rain. It might have been an ex-wife. Like, who knows? But it made them think negative thoughts. And so they watch the brain light up. And then they simply say to the person, identify what you're feeling. Say it out loud. Don't deny it. Just do your best to call it out, label it. And every single time they just verbally identified the feeling, said it out loud, the electrical activity that had just spiked diminished. Now, the two important things about that is, number one, it happened every time. Number two, the degree that it happens each time is not always the same. Like maybe it was a 1% diminishment in the negative thinking. And other times it was a 75% diminishment in the negative thinking. The impact was always the same. How much the impact was changed, which is why if I've got somebody that I'm coaching in a new negotiation technique, I'll say you're scared. I'm scared. Now say it 4 times in a row. And then I'll say, now how do you feel? And they'd say better. So the sequence is to deactivate the negative first. Then you can say, I'm going to perform. Then you can say, I'm not going to let him rattle me. And then what you got to do is imagine the person being a jerk again, but imagine you staying calm. And in this sequence, when you want to get to how you want to perform properly, imagining yourself doing it is a rehearsal for actually doing it. Now, what most people will do is they'll imagine that homeowner being a jerk, and then you'll imagine your comeuppance, the one-liner that would really put him in your place. I think you could just taste how good it would say, like something to the effect of, yeah, well, if I was as inadequate as you are too, I'd be a big jerk also. Or, whatever kind of, if I
a lot
had
of the guys who work for Nate right now are going, yes.
But that ain't imagine doing it right. That's imagining you destroying a relationship. Imagine just being calm and then saying something to the effect of like, wow, you must really be having a bad day. Instead of, there's a reason guys like you buy big sports cars.
Took a shot at your vet too, Nate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and not just like, is the reaction going to be better and are you going to have a better day as a result? But if you really think about it, which one of the two was more powerful for you to respond in like everybody does in a moment of weakness, in anger, and trash the relationship and lose a client or lose a job, or to think of words you heard on this podcast or a podcast Chris has been on or that you read and Never Split the Difference, and use one of those phrases and completely diffuse the situation, knowing you were going to do that. That's very powerful to be able to take control of that person and that situation like that.
And it really is about self-preservation. Now, in point of fact, it's going to have a positive impact on the customer. But what it really is, especially your blue-collar dude, you're fixing people's homes. I mean, you're a contractor, you're an entrepreneur. The real positive effect is how much of this on a day-to-day basis does it eat you up? Or how much you survive that much better psychologically? So when you go home to your family or whoever you're providing for, you're a better human being and you got better quality of life. The reasons you're doing it in the first place, you're more of a human being, you're a happier person when you get back to the reasons you're doing it in the first place.
And you're becoming a better person because if you're able to do that in this home with this homeowner who probably mistreated you, and it happens all the time, imagine how much better you're going to be at it when you open the front door of your house and you get that treatment from your teenager or your toddler or your wife or your dog peed on the floor and you stepped right in it, that kind of thing, where it really, really matters, because that's where it really matters. Our reactions can't really be used better or worse than when we're in the home.
Yeah, amen. I agree completely.
So that leads me to another question. So you said on the first episode that you had some practice with controlling your emotions before you got into hostage negotiation by being on the suicide hotline, which I'm like, man, this guy picks the most fun jobs ever. One after another. I think now you're wrestling alligators. Is that right?
Something like that. Well, I'm taming them. What do you scratch them under the chin or something, right? I don't know what it is.
With like a 20-foot back scratcher. Yeah. So we're big on in this show. We're huge on finding ways to practice your negotiation, communication, sales skills, and we talk a lot about. Well, the one thing in particular that I heard you and Brandon talking about on a podcast before together back in the day was that you guys will go up to the hotel clerk and ask for a free room upgrade, like try to get a free room upgrade.
Right.
And this is one that I always promote people doing on the show. I don't know. I probably have a couple dozen different ones that I promote our techs here doing and that I do myself, like trying to get a flight upgrade or getting a few pieces of information from a waiter or waitress or a bartender, particularly a waiter who's not serving you. So to make it even weirder and more difficult. But if you were going into hostage negotiation tomorrow, or you had never had any of this experience and you were getting ready to run some service calls where you only get to work if you sell, how would you go about practicing and rehearsing before you actually get to the big show?
Well, anybody you encounter, start out by calling out what they're thinking and at the moment. Like, as a point of fact, I never say to anybody, how are you today? I make a best guess on how you are today. Or, the restaurants are great. Any restaurant where you're getting ready to go in and sit down. Because my ask is they're gonna be bent out of shape. What am I talking about? All right, so I'm in what was I, Tempe, Arizona a couple of days ago. We're getting ready to go sit down at Red Robin.
Dude, you got to text me when you're this close. I'll drive to it's like 45 minutes from here.
Yeah, all right. So we're there. I'm getting ready to sit down with my guy, and waitress is walking us back, and there are plenty of tables all over the place, but there are two of us, and I want a table for four. Now, what's the waitress's the hostess's guidelines? Number one, sit them at the appropriate size table. Number two, distribute the customers so that every waitress, every waiter, gets a shot at tips.
Right.
You got to spread the wealth, and you don't want to overwork one and completely ignore another. So just based on those constraints, pretty good chance I don't want to sit where they want me to sit. So how do I anticipate this in advance? Instead of just asking straight for another table, or most people's approach, I don't want to sit there, or they sit there. I know how she's going to react. I know what she's going to get in trouble. I'm like, how much trouble am I going to get you in if I'm a great big giant jerk and I don't want to sit in that table? I want a bigger table over there. I've anticipated everything she's going to go through with the ask. If I don't want to sit where she's trying to put me, I'm the jerk. I could say, well, I'm the customer. The customer's always right. You're a service-oriented business, and you should sit me where I want to, especially when you got tables all over the restaurant. While that's true, it doesn't matter to her because these are not her rules. So I'm going to seem like a jerk. So I just call that out in advance. I'm going to seem like a great big giant jerk here. And then the other thing, too, if she doesn't sit me with the waitress who's next up, and that waitress is going to, or waiter, whoever it is, they're going to be mad at her for denying a potential tip. I'm going to say, how much trouble will I get you in? I need them to think about the problems in advance before we execute. She's got to think about how much of a big deal it's going to be. That's exactly one of a version of when we're going for a hotel suite upgrades. How much trouble I'm going to get you in when I make this ask. They gotta think about the problems in advance. And so a couple of these subtle dynamics, I'm practicing them constantly wherever I go, whether it's just because we're going into Red Robin to get something to eat. Happens to be one of my favorite places to get hamburgers. I know what I'm going to get. I know
our buddy Eric Thomas is going to love this. He's nonstop posted on Facebook about Red Robin.
All right, yeah. But, what these little encounters every day, I'm practicing on the tiny little encounters that we come across every day. because then when it's important, I've been practicing enough, it's automatic for me.
So Chris, kind of bringing that concept into our world, like as as an HVAC technician or something like that, obviously when we go into a home, there's a high probability that there's going to be something that needs addressed. Whether it's actually failed or it's in the process of failing. As soon as you unwrap something from the box, it's in a state of degradation. It's moving towards failure to some degree. And so, this happens all the time. Is it possible to employ that tactic with the homeowner even before they get to that place? And, something like, hey, Chris, before I get started here, how much trouble would I get in if I brought something to your attention about your system that isn't working right?
Oh, I love that.
That would feel like an appropriate use of that strategy.
Yeah, because it's going to make the person you ask feel large and in charge. There's a bunch of things there that really makes the listener feel really good, feel really safe. And to get people to collaborate, effectively it's deference. And deference is a powerful thing once you catch on to how much influence you can have with people by being deferential. Even if in point of fact, in the circumstances you're talking about, you as a service provider, as a person who's making repairs in a house, you're the expert. Like they should be, if you're honest and integrity and you over deliver, they should be deferring to you. You're there to help them out, to save problems. But should and is are two very different words. Should and are.
Yeah.
It's a homeowner. It's his castle. How do you gain the maximum amount of influence with the king of the castle? Especially when you're the expert. Deference goes a long way. How much trouble I get you in if I point out problems? How much trouble would I get in with you if I point out problems that I see as we go across it? The homeowner's going to be like, wow, him even asking me that made me feel really good. Let's go.
So if somebody said that to you, how would you respond?
I'd be like, well, no, you're not going to get any trouble at all. I don't want to, my instant reaction to that was when you said it, how would I respond? And I really liked the way hearing that made me feel. Like there's how is a magic word. How feels deferential. How is about moving successfully through the future. How do you want to proceed? How would you like to pay? How would you like me to address this issue? It's about moving successfully through the future with the guidance of the person you're asking. So how's a great word to open a gateway to collaboration because it's specifically focused on moving into the future successfully.
So give an example of like how you use that how concept in the negotiation piece. Like, not that we're in a life or death situation as Brian mentioned it, but it can be adversarial in the home when the homeowner is like, I didn't want this to happen. I didn't expect this to happen. And I don't like that it is happening. And one of our techs is on the other side of that saying, yeah, I understand. And yet here we are. So how do you use the how in that type of environment to help the homeowner get on your side of the fence?
Well, the first thing is, and let's jump in on the spot before that. The phrase I understand. Instead of saying I understand, come out and say what you think that you do understand. Like, I understand, and instead say, look, you didn't plan for this to happen at all. You didn't plan for this in terms of inconvenience it causes for you in your house. You'd have headed this off if somebody would have warned you in advance. It's not part of your budget. It's not part of your timing. Go ahead and say what you understand as opposed to I understand. Because if you say to me, I understand, I actually don't know what it is you understand. It's a mystery to me. You may get it or you may not. So
that's like that sympathy versus empathy piece, right?
Yeah, exactly. So just go ahead and lay out what you think, what you think is you understand. All right, here's how it looks to me. You didn't plan for this. Whatever in your gut instinct. Anybody that's in any of the service industries that you're talking about, unless today's your first day, if you've been doing it for more than a week, you've already got a massive amount of information about how people feel. you're going to be able to, your emotional intelligence is there. You just don't know what to do with it. Most of the time, just lay out what it is you think you're hearing. And then what you want people to be aware of in a deferential way is, with consequences. They're thinking about how much is going to cost me today, as opposed to how much making a repair in a timely fashion is going to save. So, what happens if we don't address this? What happens if you let this go? What are we trying to avoid here? The how and the what questions are both really the critical issues for helping people think. How is about helping people think about moving forward successfully. What is about uncovering consequences and problems. What happens if we don't address this? Asking it just like that. You're deferential. Use the right tone of voice, gentle. You can really point out some stuff that sound confrontational, but you just don't use a confrontational tone of voice. And you can really get people thinking the right tone of voice and then the right word to tee the question up. And those are usually what now.
And when I hear you say that, Chris, it makes me think of you almost become a narrator. Like you step like an out of body experience. You become a narrator to the situation, and it's almost like a voiceover comes over because when you start asking what do you think's what's going to happen? What are we trying to avoid here? And the narrator asked, what might happen next, right? And it's like you're completely removing the emotion and the adversarialness of the relationship by asking these questions in such a way that all of a sudden the homeowner, it feels disarming to me. And it's like, well, I'm no longer angry at you. I am angry at the situation. You're just pointing that out. It's clever.
Right. No, I like that as a great comparison. And what you're really removing is the negative emotion and the fear.
Yeah. So I don't want to. So before we end without covering it, probably my favorite thing that I've learned from the Black Swan Group and Never Split the Difference is the no-oriented questions. And we certainly touched on it. Well, shoot, we've touched on it with Brandon. We've touched on it with you. We've touched on it with Sandy. I'm sure we'll touch on it with Troy soon. But I would be very sad if we didn't touch on it again because more and more I see when I'm gearing some questions to get no responses when I'm going for a big yes at the end or even shaping that one into a no. I see in my own personal life, though I don't actually sell for a living anymore, I see how impactful it is. And I think that we could do an entire episode just on that and not waste a single second. So can you, for those who are listening to this episode, hadn't heard the first one or any of the other ones, haven't read the book, can you give us a brief overview of what the no questions are, why they're designed that way and what they do?
Yeah, it's triggering you're triggering a decision with the word no instead of yes, where the no moves things forward. And it's as simple as instead of, have you got a few minutes to talk? I call people on the phone and I say, is now a bad time to talk? Or I will frequently send that in a text. And there are a number of very predictable yes-oriented questions that can be immediately shifted to no-oriented questions. Do you agree becomes do you disagree? Is this a good idea becomes is this a ridiculous idea? Are you in favor? Are you against? Because people are conditioned globally that when you say yes, you've committed yourself to something you didn't think through. So let me just say no. And I automatically protect myself when I say no. So like Pavlov's dog from the great experiment, way back when, the psychology experiment, saying the word no makes us feel safe. Saying the word yes makes us anxious, makes us concerned. What's the hook? What have I let myself in for that I didn't see? Just saying a word. So we found it ridiculously easy to trigger decisions by just switching the context of the question so that we get the decision with the word no. Is now a bad time to talk? No, it's never a bad time to talk. Or even in a text message, what I get back is no. And I call right away, or they go, as a matter of fact, it is, I'm available at 3 this afternoon. Like every single time I've sent that in a text message, if they were busy, they give me a completely specific time when their calendar and their head was clear to talk, which is what I wanted in the first place. So you get implementation with it. And across the board, if you can switch from yes to no, which might be as difficult as brushing your teeth with one hand and brushing your teeth with the other hand. But it feels that awkward. By the way, I brush my teeth with my opposite hand. But the difference is so instantaneous. Once you got yourself into that tiny little habit, there isn't a person in my company that doesn't do it extensively. Because not only do we ask each other no-oriented questions, but when they go into their regular life, suddenly their whole life accelerates.
It's got to be wild working at your office. There's just got to be all these like psycho games going on. You're trying to outdo each other.
Oh, you ain't kidding. Even when Kiana Parkinson, your booking agent, will like email with some bad news, she's like, I'm reading the email. It's just, you're going to hate me for this.
Yeah.
I know what you're doing, Kiana. She's great, by the way. I gave your old booking agent a shout out on the last show, and I want to give Kiana a shout out on this one. She's awesome to deal with.
She's a good person. She's got good core values, and we like working with her a lot.
Cool. So, well, we got a few minutes before we wrap up. We would love to talk about the Black Swan Group. I want to hear how people can get more of what you teach, how, as we say often on this show, how they can spend not only their time but their money to get better. And love to hear about your latest book and the book that you have coming out with Brandon. Is that right?
Well, yeah, we've got several collaboration books that are out. Empathy and Understanding in Business is one that Brandon also contributed a chapter to. The contributions from a number of people, it's a little bit like Chicken Soup for the Soul. Other people that are contributing chapters where they talked about in their own context how empathy worked for them, whether it was in business or in leadership. And so then you're starting to see the same concept from vastly different perspectives, which then tells you it's a universal concept, just to be more effective, enjoy life more, and to be more prosperous, whatever your definition of prosperity is. So it's on Amazon, and it's a great supplemental read.
Can you say the name of that book again?
Empathy and Understanding in Business.
All right.
Now it looks like last year you also had a book specifically for real estate as well.
Yeah, Steve Shull, the book right behind me, The Full Free Agent. Steve, very interesting guy. He's a lot of fun to work with. I knew Steve for a year before I knew he had been a Super Bowl captain. Like I knew he'd been in the NFL, but normally those guys that have played in the Super Bowl, that's all you hear about.
Right.
And I finally found out I'm like, dude, you played in the Super Bowl? He's like, yeah. I said, you were a team captain? Yeah. Like, how the hell do I not know this? I mean, I've known you for over a year. Like, God bless you for just building on what you've learned. And through his playing days and his idea of hard work and diligence and then coaching, he started coaching real estate agents, and ultimately we collaborated. We put out The Full Free Agent, and people that we're coaching in real estate, as is going to happen when you use tactical empathy, they don't work as hard, they're happier, and they make more money.
That's going to happen when you're getting coached in general, but especially when you're getting coached by the never split the difference guy, for crying out loud. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So on to that note, before we wrap up, I'm in my truck and I'm ready to really invest in myself and get better at tactical empathy and everything else you guys teach. How do I go about that?
Well, the the 1-2 punch to really square you away is the book and the masterclass. Read the book, or if you like Audible, listen to the book. However you like to consume that kind of information. Now, the masterclass really brings it together. The two are a great combination. At that point in time, if you really want to continue to raise the level of your game, if you subscribe to the newsletter, The Edge, which you find by going to the website blackswanltd.com, then what that does is gives you an actionable and concise article every Tuesday morning, complimentary, that you can start using those ideas right away. It also tells you about training that we're going to do. We just finished 2 days in Philly in our diamond training, which is an immersion of training. Like you're going to get into the language and you're going to speak the negotiation language for 2 solid days.
Wow.
Now we got something coming up in LA in a couple of weeks that we call SCI, Sensitive Compartmented Information. That was a phrase in the government for stuff that's above top secret. Our most cutting edge stuff is in the SCI training. And we're doing an SCI training in LA in a couple of weeks.
What was the C?
Compartmented. Sensitive Compartmented Information, SCI.
Oh, all right. Well, I've never heard of that, and I guess that explains a lot about my clearances. Chris, this has been fantastic. We really appreciate you coming on the show here and spending some time with us. And definitely for all of our listeners, check out those resources, his book, the Black Swan Group website. I know you have a ton of free content that you're putting out constantly in those resources as well as beyond. And so we really appreciate that. As we wrap things up here, obviously it's been, I guess about 8 years since you've written that book. So we're starting to head towards the 10-year mark here. And I know you're not an active negotiator anymore, but I know you, to put it bluntly, as we talked about earlier in the show, if you're not learning, you're not being the competitive edge. And so I assume that you're following your own words there. Wrap us up with one of the new concepts that Chris Voss is exploring in his head and how it could be something that we could be thinking about right now.
Well, I get actively involved in some of my top level deals. And I'm briefing up one of the guys that's handling most of our negotiation. And I'm saying all right, so no, don't do that. Behind the scenes, that's a bad idea. What we're doing, you're negotiating against yourself, you're compromising before you get to the table. And the problem with doing that is the other side's never going to care. And that's why, we don't start changing terms to give them a yesable agreement, any of this Harvard nonsense. It's ridiculous. And then it occurred to me that's exactly what the other side is doing. So we got into the negotiation, and instead of different things that they'd done that I thought was a bad idea, I thought, oh, all right, so that's the dynamic. They compromised before they got to the table, and they want us to appreciate how hard they've been working. So when we had a very significant difference in a particular term, instead of counter-offering, I said, look, I know you guys have worked really hard on this. I know you guys have put a lot of effort into this, and you are sort of mystified that we don't appreciate it, and you just want us to know how hard you guys have been working to even get to that point. After we get off the call, a couple of people on my team said, did you see how their founder relaxed when you said that? Like half of their team, their whole body language changed. They went from being oppositional to feeling much better, to being appreciated, and then consequently, they got a lot more collaborative. So I'm much now thinking all right, so what are we trying to get people to stop doing? That's what's going on. How do we help them through it so that we change the game and they don't feel adversarial at all? How do we get even more collaborative and actually end up with better terms?
Wow. So instead of spending your time thinking, how do we get the upper hand or the edge on the people we're negotiating with, how do we get more collaborative?
Yeah. And to quote one of our clients from last year, he said, I made more money being collaborative than I ever made being cutthroat.
Wow. So good to end on that. Chris Voss, we so appreciate you, man. Keep writing great books and content, and we'd love to hear from you again sometime.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks so much. I'll see you soon, Chris.
Yeah.
Hey, that's a wrap for this podcast. Man, what a fantastic conversation with Chris. He's just so conversational, so easygoing. It's almost disarming to the degree that you don't pay attention to the incredible impact of his statements and what he's talking about. These concepts are battle proven. They are, if you haven't read the book, you are missing out, because what we talked about today doesn't even scratch the surface on the things that are contained in that book. And obviously, he continues to write and produce more content. So awesome episode with Chris. Go back and listen to this one again. Please share this with somebody who could use a little bit of encouragement, whether it's dealing with self-doubt or being more collaborative in the home. And so many other things and strategies that he has designed, including those no questions, which is really a game changer and an easy fix that you can make in your presentations and conversations today. So we love having Chris on. Make sure you let him know that. Make sure you let us know that. And we would sure love if you do and share the episode out there. We're going to leave you now with our weekly challenge, which continues to be the same: to choose to wake up each and every morning and waste no day.